Hello everybody, this is Flashmaniac C of Eye Laser Beams, and with me tonight, as always, is Breakmaniac C. Break, give us a shout out.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Can I offer you something to eat?
I offer you tea. Offer you tea. Tea, 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 tea.
And something to eat. In all seriousness, welcome to Act 2 of Sonic the Hedgehog. We are going to be discussing the comic books tonight, which is a topic that we haven't really ever covered before. We probably alluded to it at some point in ELB history, but
There has got to have been some form of reference here or there. The way our stream of consciousness works is anything will just randomly spill out at any given time, which I guess is what the outtakes are for, isn't it?
that's pretty much our method of operation. Yeah, that's usually how we seem to do things around here.
Yeah. Totally.
And we've got so many obscure in-jokes and memes and references that, they just they all run together after a while.
Yeah, we still need to compile that long list of random crap that spews out of our brains.
Yeah, and document everything so that people understand what we're talking about when I say, the 9-ball is wearing the elven shoes, and
I don't think I even know what that means.
wants to ask us a question about that hedgehog.
Okay, I know what that means, but...
Well, that having been said, we usually when we do a rant, we usually pick a topic and both of us talk about it.
Yeah, more often than not.
And tonight, this is going to be kind of different from our usual style of operation, because Greg will pretty much be single-handedly handling one half of it, and I'll be pretty much single-handedly handling the other half of it. Say that 5 times fast with a mouthful of crackers.
That's kind of like how we did episode 3, where we pretty much volleyballed back and forth between our different anime picks.
Yes, and tonight we're going to be doing the same, but with Sonic. So, that having been said, we are going to be covering the Sonic comics, which are a really big part of Sonic culture, because like the Metroid series, there was kind of a gap in the Sonic gaming era when Sonic games weren't coming out regularly enough to justify the fandom still being alive, per se. And, let's face it, Sega died several times in America before finally cementing itself into something of a regular system. So Sonic would kind of fade in and out of popularity, and as a result, I have to say probably the one thing that really kept it going, and it's been going strong since, 1992, 1993?
I want to say, about when Sonic 2 came out is the time that the series really grabbed a hold of the consciousness of the collective American video gamer and said, look, here I am, embrace me, love me, and I will stay with you. But up until then, You pretty much were like, oh yeah, that blue guy that goes faster than the red and blue guy. Yeah, I liked that game. That game was awesome.
But he doesn't shoot a gun like the other blue guy.
Yeah, seriously. But, and this was even before the days that the concept of the internet really took off and actually, was cemented into what we know today. So there weren't even, the mega sites like Artale Productions, or even places like DeviantArt, where people could post custom characters that they came up with, or just really talk to anybody not local about this random series that you happen to pick up and all of a sudden fell in love with.
I know, and you have to really give the comics credit, because they were honestly the real reason that the Sonic fandom is as big and as influential as it is today. Like it or love it, Sonic is a huge, huge, huge portion of the gaming fandom consciousness today, like you said, and so I think the comics are really more than the cartoons, and possibly even more than the games themselves.
Well, really, the games themselves really just all they do is kind of flesh out a world. Like,
Yeah.
if you're the type of person that's really into the story and the mythology behind a thing, the games really weren't giving you anything as to that, especially when you create characters as appealing as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and whoever else they happen to throw in there. I mean, people like those characters, people want to get to know those characters, but the games at first really did very, very little to flesh out the characters the way that the fans were looking for.
Yeah, they really didn't seem to put a whole lot of effort into personifying the characters in the video games. They really, really started working on that, probably, like we said, in the comics. And
yeah,
although the comics didn't influence the games very much, I mean, you really see very, very little that's actually taken from the comics and used directly in the games.
The only thing that I can think of off the top of my head is chili
Sonic
dogs.
Spinball.
No, chili dogs. Sonic
Well,
Spinball
yeah.
does not count. And even then, that's only a recent trend.
Yeah, truthfully, yeah, that's right. You know, and when you stop and think about it, really, well, the comics didn't influence the games. The comics are their own continuity in their own right, and they really serve to keep Sonic running, you know, no pun intended, for all of these years. So tonight we are here to pay tribute to the Sonic comic series, and we are here to talk about the influence that they had, and in general, just cover them in our little Sonic marathon that we've been up to.
Yes, you guys have been waiting long enough for it. Tonight I'll be covering the Archie Comics aspect, since that's what I really sunk my teeth into and was into for many years. And Flash, on the other hand, will be taking up the reins of the British-produced Sonic the Comic.
Bally-ho, Pippers.
Swings and roundabouts. Where are my Watsits?
Where are my Watsits? Say pop! Alright, that having been said, now that I think we've officially alienated Huffy from our remaining list of listeners.
We love you, Huff.
Let's get this show on the road.
Alright, go ahead, Flash. You start things off tonight.
Oh, I'm gonna be covering Sonic the Comic first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Sonic the Comic. This one is so unique, because unlike the rest of the Sonic collective, this is really, I think this is the series that really established Sonic as an anti-hero kind of character. And it's kind of interesting to see him in this role, because, you know, usually when you think of Sonic as a character, you think of that easygoing, you know, overconfident but lovable, well-meaning, you know, rebellious teenager with the, you know, he's definitely always got a plan. He thinks on his feet. He's a hero. He's the good guy. He's the guy that everybody loves and idolizes.
You must be talking about, like, Saddam, because the games aren't anything like that.
that is the Sonic I'm talking about, yes.
Okay, got it. The definitive Sonic.
When you stop and think about Sonic in the games...
You and I are pretty much on that same level, right? Sonic Saddam is pretty much the epitome of that character.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
But I'm talking about the typification of Sonic, that he's warm and personable, and he'll be there for you when you need him, and he's always cracking wise, but he really means well. In other words, the good kid, so to speak.
Yeah.
And when you stop and you know, it's like video game Sonic has pretty much been like a thrill-seeking, globe-trotting, you know, character recently. He hasn't really had, I mean, it's like the more games come out, the less personality he seems to have, to the point where he's just basically a, hey, alright, let's do this, it's awesome. I mean, he's pretty much become generic. But I'm talking about...
He's kind of become a loner, too.
Yeah, I'm talking about he really has, hasn't he? He's kind of alienated Tails from his personal clique, and he and Knuckles were never that close to begin with, so, I mean...
Closer than now, I dare say.
Yeah, true. But when you stop and think about Sonic, really the character, especially the Saddam character that I'm thinking of, and even to an extent, AOSTH Sonic, just that overall guy, he's happy-go-lucky, you know, and basically runs with the wind and does everything his own way, but he's really a good guy.
Yeah.
Sonic the Comics version of Sonic is an absolute jerk. I mean, he is... Whereas the other Sonics are good-natured, and they tease and they play rough, but they're really good guys. This Sonic is basically like you look at him and he's almost closer to. He's as close as Sonic can get to somebody like a Bruce Wayne style character, while still clinging to being Sonic.
I'm having a hard time visualizing that.
Why don't you let me explain that?
Go for it.
This Sonic is very, very difficult. Basically, I know a person who refers to this specific Sonic as jerk-ass Sonic.
Who's that, may I ask?
Pretty much everybody that's ever read this comic book.
Okay, go on.
Basically, though, he's pretty much he's a jerk. I mean, he's not. This Sonic doesn't have any redeeming traits other than he's the designated hero. Whereas, like I said, whereas the other ones are happy and they're easygoing and they're playful, this Sonic he's not really angsty, but he's the kind of hero that basically just never he never wakes up on the right side of the bed, if that makes sense. Here's a really good case in point. I'm just going to flip to a random issue. I'm thinking number 47 ought to do this.
Real quick, could you give me like an example of an anime hero that would match this?
An anime hero that would match this specific character. Man, that's really tough. Because even most anime heroes are really kind of hard to typify this as. I'm trying to think of maybe somebody from Mega Man, and it's not coming to me. Basically, the closest example I could come up with would probably be maybe season 1. Yeah, maybe season 1 Enzon. Not as much of an loner as Enzon, but basically, you remember how Enzon originally was really confrontational? He would go out of his way to pick fights with Netto, and in general, he'd just give him a hard time early on in the series.
Yeah.
I guess a really good example of the kind of here's an excellent example. I don't know if you played enough of it to really get a feel for his personality. Think of Zero from Command Mission X. You probably didn't play far enough through the game.
I don't know. I got up to the desert area, wherever that was, with the timed battles.
Do you remember the scene in the game where X introduces Zero to the Resistance group, and Zero decides he's going to work solo?
No. I actually may as well just replay that whole game, because there's so much about it that I don't remember.
Okay. There's a scene in the game where X has gathered up his little ragtag band of heroes.
Yeah.
And Zero runs into them, and he's like, these guys are the dregs of Giga City. I don't want to work with you. I'll work solo before I team up with basically ne'er-do-wells. And X is like, but they're really good people. And Zero's like, no, I don't like stuff. And so he turns around and storms out. Basically, that's the kind of character this Sonic is. This Sonic doesn't play nice with other people. He's, in general, it's kind of like, he's even mean to Tails. Like, he's constantly insulting Tails and picking on him, and everybody in the series just blindly idolizes Sonic as a character. In fact, like, the only character...
Is it just because he's Sonic?
I think that's... Well, possession is 9/10 of the law. I really think with this specific Sonic, it's the fact that he's the hero. So, he's constantly saving everybody. But it's he's a really kind of a hard character. Maybe think of this Sonic more in terms of Knuckles than thinking of him as Sonic.
Whoa, okay.
He's really just kind of hard to grasp where he's going with this. Basically, it's kind of like this. He like a standard Sonic the Comic story begins with, there being a mission, and Sonic and the group of freedom fighters going and taking care of this mission, doing what they need to do. Somebody gets in trouble, like they get caught by a robot, or they fall off of the ledge or something, and Sonic saves them.
Typical hero fare.
They gratefully thank him, and Sonic insults them in exchange. I mean, that's basically how he acts in this show. He doesn't act like he normally does.
In this show?
In this comic, I'm sorry, Mr. Smart Guy Face. Basically, okay, here we go. This is a really good example of it. I'm going to read just a very quick excerpt from this one website that talks about the Sonic comic specifically.
All right.
Sonic in the British Fleetway comic is a jerk-ass. Not an issue went by where he didn't verbally abuse Tails or put down one of the other good guys. Not only did he always get away with his behavior, but the entire planet actually worshipped him for it. Admittedly, this was more to accentuate his attitude, but they took it far. Towards the end of the comic series, he would start to realize how much of a jerk he had been, and most certainly he wasn't always right about everything. But unfortunately, by this point, it was too late to save him from being typecast as this kind of character. And basically, he's really a lot like that. He's one of those characters that he seems to be able to run his mouth and do whatever, but actions speak louder than words. So it's kind of like he'll save you, but he's going to give you crap the entire time he's doing it. So he's a very difficult character to wrap yourself around, because he's not the heroic, awesome and fun Sonic that we've been seeing forever. So, he's definitely a different character, and I want to talk about the Freedom Fighters specifically in Sonic the Comic, because they're very different from the American Freedom Fighters we got.
How so?
Basically, the set that's common to both series is obviously Sonic and Tails, because they're inseparable. But you have Sonic, who's, like I said, he's the jerk hero that can say anything and get away with it. You have Tails, who's the idol worshiper. He's a lot the same as the other Tails we've seen. He really seems to lack the video game version of Tails' ingenuity, so he's not like, for instance, in Sonic the Comic, the tornado is Sonic's plane, and although Tails knows how to fly it, it belongs to Sonic. Sonic's the one that originally used it. Sonic's the one that taught Tails to fly it, so, it's basically Tails mimics Sonic in this, and he really doesn't have any unique traits or personification of his own. It is kind of lame, really. He's basically Sonic's sidekick in this, and kind of really is lacking. Knuckles is also in this series, though he's not really a freedom fighter, but he does hang out a lot with Sonic, and he is actually much more outgoing in this specific version.
Wow, that's like a total flip-flop from what you would expect from that character based on the games and various other forms of media.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And basically, it's like I said, Sonic got Knuckles' personality and vice versa. Knuckles is outgoing. I mean, he's still a jerk, and he still butts heads with Sonic and everybody else because he's stubborn and gullible. But Knuckles is the kind of person that, will... Like, let me put it to you this way. Here's a great example. A old man needs help across the street. Sonic will help him across the street and criticize him for being old. Knuckles will help him across the street and say, you really need to take better care of your health, sir, or something like that. Tails will help him across the street and be like, I'm doing this because this is what Sonic would do. So, you've got these three characters, and Knuckles is basically, he's a lot more polite than Sonic, which is really unlike anything we've ever seen before. He still stays on the floating island, he still takes care of that and that sort of thing, but he's not... Knuckles is not as, he's not as much of a loner as he is in the games and the Archie comics and other instances of the Sonic media. The Freedom Fighters in Sonic the Comic that are unique to the Freedom Fighter team. First off, let's start with Porker Lewis, just because he's the one that pretty much everybody knows. Porker Lewis is kind of based off of the pig from the old Sonic games that, you free from the little robots in the various stages.
He's based on Badnik Fuel?
He's based on Badnik Fuel, but he's kind of like... he's not like a tiny pig, obviously. He's like Sonic's height, wears clothes, talks, etc. But visually he looks like that character, just slightly more Mobianified.
Okay.
Porker Lewis is basically the rotor for this specific set. He's bookish, he's shy, he's usually the butt of all of Sonic's jokes because Sonic he picks on him, which is kind of cruel. He's the team techie. If something breaks or if they have machinery problems or whatever, Porker's the go-to man for that. I think there's a part of his personality that really seems to resemble like Peter Parker, and not Spider-Man, but Peter Parker specifically, the mild-mannered, reporter.
Okay.
He's basically the meek geek character.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Yeah. We have Amy Rose, who everybody knows, but this Amy Rose is unlike Sonic Adventure era Amy. Hi, I'm so in love with you. I'm a ditzy, high school girl. I don't really know things. My skirt looks like Jane Jetson's. I carry a huge hammer. Yeah, exactly. Why Sonic-Ku? This Amy is significantly more plucky. She's definitely seems to be the Sonic's conscience in essence, and even then, she's the only character in the series, ironically enough, that won't take crap off of Sonic, which is really kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah, she's definitely the non-stereotypical female token character, but she lives it out beautifully. She's in love with Sonic, and she idolizes Sonic, and she thinks Sonic's great.
But she'll call him a jerk if she needs to.
Yeah, she's not afraid to tell him, hey, stop being a jackass. Basically, I mean, she's she's happy to get in there and get in his face. And this version of Amy wears her classic outfit for the first few issues, and then she just changes to like a plaid kiltish skirt and a t-shirt with Sonic's face on it. So it's kind of.
Are you saying Amy goes punk?
Amy goes punk, yeah. She spikes her hair up pretty straight, so it kind of looks like Sonic's Super Sonic's hair is how she usually wears hers. Her special skill is archery. She carries a crossbow, and she's really good with it too.
Oh, nice. So she's actually offensive.
Yes, she's actually an offensive Sonic character. In terms of personality, you can probably say she's got a little bit of Sally in her. Though, whereas Sally is pragmatic, and she's often the one that puts a kibosh on Saddam Sonic's shenanigans.
Yeah.
This one's she's probably closer to Sally's spunky side, while still maintaining a toot of her own. Let's talk about, let's see, we covered Amy, we covered Porker, we covered Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, obviously. There are only a couple of other characters, and both of them are kind of hard to explain. So I'll go ahead and go with the one that ends up getting replaced later. This is a mild spoiler for the comics. I'm assuming you don't really mind, but
how far into the series does it take place?
I want to say it's like 50 issues in.
That's not too bad.
It's not a major spoiler, and it's on the cover when it happens. So it's basically It's kind of it's an example of a character. I won't tell you what happens if you don't want to know, or do you really mind? Is it going to make a difference?
To people listening in, you may want to skip forward about 60 to 120 seconds if you don't want to hear this.
Okay. When you hear the sound of the chime, turn the page. Johnny Lightfoot is one of the two remaining freedom fighters that we haven't covered, and he's pretty much Sonic's right-hand man. Johnny is also the only character Sonic seems to have even a modicum of respect for, which is really kind of interesting. Johnny is a tall rabbit, and he's the tallest and probably the most intimidating-looking character in the set. But he's probably about... If Sonic, just for an example, if Sonic is 4 feet tall, then Johnny's probably like 6.5.
Wow.
He's a thin rabbit, he wears a red leather jacket and jeans, and he's a staff user, so he carries around an extendable metal pipe that he uses to fight with. He's got kind of like a sort of Fonzie kind of look about him, but unlike Fonzie, he's not a jerk. He's actually probably He's actually the token nice guy. Like I said earlier, if Sonic will help somebody across the street and give him crap about it, Johnny is more the kind of character that would help them across the street, do the grocery shopping for them, load their car, and follow them home just to make sure that they didn't get a flat tire along the way. He's definitely a lot of times he's the front man for the group in that, if Sonic can't go into a situation and be diplomatic, then Johnny will go in for him and basically say what Sonic is trying to say minus the insults and jackassery. He's a good guy, and he really truly is a good guy, and it's a real shame when he dies. and he gets killed
Zong
off for real.
spoilers.
Yeah, Zong spoilers. He gets killed off for real, and I won't say how, but basically he dies, and when he does, that's really when Sonic experiences a turning point in the series. He stops being... Up until that point, occasionally Sonic will crack a smile, and, you'll know that he's really just joking. Sonic really takes Johnny's death hard to the point where he becomes, pretty much at that point, he becomes a dark hero, resigned to, I'm gonna lose men along the way, is sort of the kind of Sonic he becomes. Johnny was really a really cool character for the series, and as the comics progressed, he actually got some character development, which was nice. Of the staff, he's probably the most expendable character, but you're still kind of sad to see him go because he really was a neat guy. The last character that we have is the one that pretty much replaces Johnny on the team, although really she's more of a replacement for Porker because Porker later leaves the team for personal reasons. But they introduce Techno the Canary, and she is another female character. She's a green bird, and whereas Porker is the meat geek, Techno is pretty much an example of a '90s working girl. She's cheerful, and she's not ditzy, but she's always got a smile on her face, and she's one of those kinds of characters that she's sort of a lot like, I'd say her closest character is probably Bunny, and that she gets in there and she's not afraid to do the job and do it right, but she's not complaining. She doesn't take crap off of anybody. She's not spunky like Amy, and whereas Amy will get in there and crack wise and do stuff. Techno's pretty much just, she's not phony, but she's not a very thickly developed character, so you kind of watch her and you're like, I can get into her, but she's not offensive and in your face. She's just there and she does the job. She's basically, like I said, a replacement for Porter when he leaves. And so she becomes sort of like she becomes the chief computer person that, stays behind at the base and, mans the walkie-talkies, so to speak.
Right.
One other character appears as well, and he really comes into the show pretty late. And he was kind of an interesting character because I really didn't see them going with this sort of a guy. He kind of actually reminds me a lot of Ray the Flying Squirrel, if you can believe that. But
how?
He's not nearly as freaking annoying. But believe it or not, his name is Short Fuse, and he originally is introduced as a Badnik, as a robot squirrel character, but he manages to regain his mind and eventually declares war on Robotnik. And his armor is made out of a very special alloy called Megatel, which is probably similar to adamantium or something. I mean, it's like the indestructible metal. Robotnik, when he made him, really overdid himself, and of course, naturally, that's why he, would turn on him.
Right.
But his full name is Shortfuse the Cybernik, and his real name is Shorty the Squirrel. He's like the token hothead, whereas Sonic is kind of like the jerk. He's the hothead. He'll blow up at anything, and he's actually, like his name, he's short. I think he's actually a couple feet shorter than even Amy. So he's not very tall. He's kind of like I said, he's sort of a gag character. But they put him in there, and he eventually becomes like the muscle man of the team. And as the series progresses on, they find a way to de-roboticize him to the point where he can still keep his suit of armor, but when he wants to get out of it, he can and move around like an Mobian. So it's really he becomes basically as close to Bunny as they can get in terms of having a power character, while still probably being best suited to just being the lovable hothead. So the Freedom Fighter set is really different and really diverse compared to the American comics. Robotnik is also an interesting character in this as well. because obviously we're familiar very much with Sad Am Robotnik, who was the villain to be feared. This Robotnik's visual design originally is based off of classic Sonic 1 through Sonic 3 Robotnik, or
Yeah,
the
but
original Eggman.
But it's the Metamorphosis. Like, I know the Metamorphosis, and it's the Metamorphosis that trips me the heck out.
I take it you saw that issue then.
It's just so bizarre.
Well, anyway, halfway through I guess you could call it the first season, like after about 10 or 15 issues, Dr. Robotnik decides to, like Breakman said, metamorphose, basically. And what he does is he gets inside this big eggshell and rehatches himself, and he comes out transformed into the AOSTH version of Robotnik, only unlike the AOSTH Robotnik's "I'll offer you tea and something to eat," this guy is actually intimidating. He's basically AOSTH Robotnik's visual appeal with Sad Am Robotnik's personality.
It's so hard for me to visualize that.
It really is, and it's really weird. And what really gets freaky is later when they get to the Sonic Adventure arc, he actually changes into the Sonic Adventure era Robotnik's clothing, while still looking like classic Robotnik, which is really cool. It's like this, he's like ultimate Robotnik. He's got visual cues from absolutely everything. He's really cool in this, and actually they did a great job. They did a great job on his personality, because he actually comes off as being a intimidating Robotnik without being over the top. So he's a very cool character, and his sidekick in this series, in the Sonic comics and Archie and in Sad Am, Robotnik's sidekick is his own nephew, Snively, and basically who plays Igor to Robotnik's, various nefarious deeds. This guy
Welcome
is
home,
rhymer.
sir.
This
Did you
guy's
have a pleasant trip?
Shut up, Snively.
This sidekick's name is Grimer, and he physically looks more like an Igor than Snively does. He is Robotnik's chief scientist, basically. So whereas the Robotnik in the other series is pretty much, he's the one that does all his own stunts, this guy is pretty much behind most of Robotnik's schemes, and actually is the one that carries him throughout the series. Robotnik spends more of his time focusing on the actual Empire, and he's kind of got almost like an M. Bison sort of personality in this. I'm talking about the Street Fighter cartoon here. He's the dictator, and Grimer is the evil scientist in this case, which is kind of neat. Case in point, Grimer is the one that designs Metal Sonic in the comics, not Robotnik.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of interesting. Grimer faithfully serves Robotnik from start to finish in the series until towards the very end, and I won't spoil that for you. But he pretty much, where Robotnik is, Grimer is always short to follow, and he's the one that usually helps Robotnik with most of his schemes. And you don't really think much of him originally, and he's kind of just a freaky-looking character. He's like this bony, green, maldeformed human with black Dr. Wily hair and weird lips. He's wearing a lab coat. He's got like oxygen tanks strapped to his back. He's really freaky looking. But, he's kind of like that lovable evil sidekick, but yeah, whatever. So, the actual comics themselves have a really cool plot. They start out with just kind of various game adaptations and that sort of thing, trying to find their way. And then eventually, probably, I would say, I'm just going to flip to one randomly, I'm going to say probably about issue 15 is when they really started getting serious with the comic book. And this is really when the series decided that it wanted to go with Sonic in a serious and straightforward direction. Sonic becomes gritty, and he starts becoming a character that you can really wrap your mind around. And even though he's a jerk, he's still that gritty hero kind of character. And Robotnik starts working on taking over Mobius, or it's not. I don't think it's called. I can't remember if it's called Mobius in the comics or not. I think it is. But he decides to take over. Basically, he decides to take over the planet. And so he figures out this really cool way to do it. What he does is he takes Sonic and he throws him in another dimension. And this is really weird because it's like, oh wow, Robotnik actually wins for once. And it's kind of like the Sad-Am dimension where they throw the king in the zone of silence.
Yeah.
Sonic gets sent through a zone teleporter, which takes him to basically this void. And he, while he's in this void, he only feels like he's in there for just a short while. But when he comes back, he's been gone 6 months because time elapses differently in both areas. So while he's in this void, he goes on some kind of weird, bizarre, surreal adventures. But when he comes back 6 months later, Robotnik's had just enough time to conquer the planet because, oh hey, guess what? Sonic wasn't there to save everybody. So originally, Robotnik starts out as basically this evil scientist, and when Sonic comes back, he's a dictator now. And it's really bizarre because you're sitting there going, "Oh, okay, I didn't see that coming." He has actually, like I said, he's conquered the planet, and he has set up all of these factories and the roboticizer. Sonic comes back to find his friends roboticized, so he breaks them out of the machines. And roboticization in Sonic the Comic is very similar to the game concept. It's basically a hard enough jolt equals, oh hey, your guys are safe and everything, disregarding the fact they've been on life support for 6 months.
Yeah.
But, so Sonic frees his friends, and he has to basically start taking Robotnik down, and pretty much that's where they go. This is the series that established the concept that Dr. Robotnik was originally Dr. Kentobor and was a good character.
Yeah, I knew that. I remember that aspect of it.
This is where that concept took root. And it's very convoluted how it happens, so I won't get into it. But basically, long and the short of it, Dr. Robotnik used to be good, and he's not anymore. So, Dr. Kentobor, however, is still alive. His consciousness is, anyway, in the form of a computer. And so Sonic carries a laptop around with him that's the Kentobor computer that basically provides wisdom from Sonic's old friend, and he uses it as sort of a tactician to help, plan the meetings and that sort of thing.
Whoa. They used to be friends?
Sonic and Kentobor?
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Kentobor is the entire reason Sonic is who he is.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, Sonic originally started life as... I'm just going to mention his backstory here. Sonic originally started life as a brown hedgehog with no speed whatsoever, just a normal, ordinary hedgehog. And he, one day he was burrowing into the ground, and he came across a lab that was underground, and Dr. Kentobor lived inside there. And so they met, and they became friends, and Sonic said, he started training because Dr. Kentobor had this, it's not an elliptical trainer, it's a treadmill. He had a treadmill in his lab, and so Sonic would get on it, and he'd jog on it occasionally, he wasn't very fast, like I said.
Right.
And, eventually one day, Kentobor started working with him to make Sonic more athletic so he could stand up to bullies and that sort of thing. And, one day Sonic got to running on the treadmill, and it started to have a reaction because Kentobor had been working on an experiment that he wanted to take all of the evil energy in the world and compress them into some kind of container that would hold the evil energy and make the world a good place to be. And so he was very idealistic, but unfortunately, of course, the story can't have a happy ending. Kentobor successfully compressed all of the evil energy in the world into 7 gemstones, the Chaos Emeralds. And you can see where this is going.
Yeah.
And the machine that he used to do it overloaded. So part of the evil energy was dispersed back into the world. Most of it ended up in the Emeralds, giving them their source of power, and the rest of it overloaded directly into Kenobor himself, transforming him into Robotnik. When the machine overloaded and did that, however, it also had another interesting side effect. It overpowered the treadmill Sonic was running on, and the evil energy kept him in place. So Sonic started running on the treadmill, couldn't stop. That's how he gained his super speed. And his spines were all thin and loose originally, kind of like Amy's, except even thinner and smaller. And they actually began to fuse together. And when he cooled down, he changed to his blue color, and his spines actually are fused together. So he's now a mutant hedgehog. And that's how Sonic became blue and super fast. And it sounds crazy. I mean, it's got that, that 60s schlock comic book sort of, this is how I gained my superpowers, now I must kill again, sort of thing. But, basically, at that point, Sonic and Kenobor sort of helped create each other, and Sonic became the super fast hedgehog, and Robotnik became this evil character, so Robotnik set out trying to take over the world, and Sonic realized he had to stop him. So they originally were once friends, and now they're enemies, but Sonic still has the consciousness of Kenobor in the computer that he carries around with him. It's kind of like a simulation of him. I don't think it's the actual real Kenobor, but, he talks to him, and Kenobor basically helps him with planning and strategies and that sort of thing, since he and Robotnik are the same person, essentially. They sort of have a link in that Kenobor can pretty much always figure out what Robotnik's about to do because they think a lot alike.
Naturally.
So there's a lot of really thick, really deep stuff in it. Knuckles gets an amazing storyline in the comic books, but I won't go into all of that here because I've already used up like the vast majority of my hour. But basically, Sonic the Comic is really a great series, and as it goes on, it starts out kind of goofy, and it gets really serious until probably towards the end when it hits the Sonic Adventure adaptation is when the series ends. Right after that, and it's the end of the comic book. But they really did a great job with it, and you could tell they really put their all into it because they tried to make a gritty sort of. It kind of reminds me a lot of Howard the Duck, if you've ever read that comic book, and that it's kind of surreal, and it's kind of got that, you're not always quite sure. It's definitely British comic media at its finest, but they did a great job with it, and it really kind of, in its own way, captures the Sonic that we all know and love, especially in that it has a lot of the influence of the video games in it versus SatAM, which basically didn't have anything to go off of, so they just made stuff up as they went along. Sonic the Comic really takes a lot from the video games, and so, you'll see Sonic walking through, a checkered land with floating platforms and monitors with his own face on them. But they did a great job on it. It's a really cool comic, and I highly recommend it to any Sonic fan, and even those of you who aren't, that are just listening to us ramble. And if you are, why are you listening to us ramble about something you don't even like?
Just wait until we start talking about Mega Man again, then you're really in for it.
Alrighty, Break. Baton pass to you. Take it away.
Alrighty. Baton passinating.
And I'm just going to listen and occasionally and oh yeah.
Oh, so we're switching roles here. I see.
Pretty much.
Okay, then.
It sucks. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk about the Archie comics, and, well, that's all the time we have for today.
I wasn't that bad, was I?
No. We've done worse. We've done much worse.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's definitely the truth.
So, at any rate, Archie comics. Like I mentioned earlier, Archie was pretty much my bread and butter when I didn't have any actual Sonic games on hand. Pretty much I got my start with Sonic outside the games when, you're a kid, you get home from elementary school, you turn on the TV, and there's some derivative of a terrible Disney cartoon on during that time block or whatever. Eventually I started getting sick of I don't know, anyone remember Bonkers?
This is just a very, 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 very small mini rant. It's literally 2 sentences. I used to have tiers for Disney cartoons. In the top tier,
like the good ones? Like DuckTales and Darkwing Duck?
Yeah. DuckTales, Darkwing Duck, and Chippendales Rescue Rangers were in the top tier.
Boom.
Those are shows I would rush home to watch. And the second tier were shows that I would watch if they were on, but I wasn't a big fan of them, like Tailspin, pretty much.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Like Mighty Ducks, and then everything else was in the tier of shows that I would only watch while waiting for something else to come on. And those were Bonkers, etc. So
yeah.
That's basically how my tier system worked. But please continue.
So you can understand the predicament.
Oh yeah, I definitely can understand the predicament.
So one day it gets to the point where I'm like, there's nothing on. Like, I'm even turning it to PBS, and I'm like, oh, no thanks, I don't want to watch Wishbone. Eventually I turn it to just...
gosh, why did you have to bring up that? Wishbone sucked. Nobody liked Wishbone.
Nobody liked Wishbone, at any rate. So eventually I turned it to some random channel, and... what? Sonic's on my TV. But I don't have a Genesis. And this is obviously not a game. I will watch this now. And so pretty much that was my introduction of Sonic outside the games. And so when one day I'm randomly walking through a supermarket, go to check out, what Spider-Man's up to this month in the comic rack, lo and behold, for the very first time ever, I see a single solitary issue of Sonic the Hedgehog, issue number 19, staring back at me. Now, as a kid, comics, you love those, by default, right?
Oh, yeah, every kid loved comics growing up.
And
unless you didn't, in which case, what's wrong with you?
Seriously. But to make it, just to compound upon that, it was a comic about Sonic the frickin' Hedgehog. I was on cloud 9. I got that thing into my possession, and it was very shortly after that I would peruse the comic stand and go back every month looking for a new issue, and it was probably about the point when issue 21 came out. I actually didn't even get to read issue 20 just because I couldn't find it on the comic stands. But issue 21 came out, and then I started my own subscription and pretty much kept it going for, I want to say, up until the 50s or 60s of the Sonic comic.
Oh, wow. So you were on it for a couple of years then.
Yeah, no, I was devout. I loved that. And I think most of it has to do with the fact that even though the comics, I went back later and read some of the older back issues, and you can really see that the idea for the American Archie Sonic the Hedgehog comic in the beginning was really sort of trying to take a fusion of the Sonic cartoons that were on in America at the time, being of course SADAM and AOSTH. So they really kind of tried to fuse those worlds together into one entity, being that most of the cast of characters in the comic were straight out of SADAM.
Right. Even
though a lot of the situations were pretty much purely slapstick, and that's, of course, taken right out of AOSTH.
Oh, yeah.
But the interesting...
Supersonic has a super sense of humor.
Oh, whoopee cushion, Antoine's stupid.
We'll be here all week, folks. Please, whatever you do, don't touch the veal.
But the interesting thing about it is that they fused those two worlds together, but then managed to turn it around on its ear and still attempt to tie it in with the games. So you would have SADAM characters running around doing AOSTH things while collecting rings and Chaos Emeralds and running around loop-de-loops and bopping badniks all at the same time. it's really kind of an interesting brain screw.
Yes, it is.
But after, it was like that, I want to say, pretty much up until the 20s of the Sonic comic, which is where the series started, pretty much stopped trying to be just the monthly chuckle fest with madcap adventures with the Speedy Guy and Tails and those other people that newbies won't recognize at all. And
yes.
And that's when they started really tying. By that point they had established the world that everyone was living in. So at that point they really started introducing a lot more aspects of SatAM into the mix. Like they still kept everyone in this specific version of Mobius that they had established, with being basically a more cheerful, not as depressing version of the SatAM world, but with random game elements thrown in. And but then they started introducing more aspects of SatAM, like I want to say around issue 24 was when they started seriously talking about, like, oh yeah, by the way, we're still trying to rescue King Acorn, remember? Zone of Silence and whatnot. And they took cues from that, but still kept enough of they still had enough artistic license to take that and fit it into more of the, we're trying, it's not working out too well, but we're not going to get depressed about it, which is what SatAM seemed to do a lot of the time. This isn't working, we're never going to save my father. It's okay, Sal Gal, we'll be all right. I suppose you might be correct on that matter. But in any aspect...
And please insert the standard obligatory 80s, 90s cartoon. Are you guys sure about this? From some hesitant Freak of the Week character who's tagging along with the main party guys.
Oh, God, God, I don't even remember his name. The Ram guy.
Yes, oh gosh. Yeah, I don't remember him either, because he's not important.
No, he's not.
Oh man, though I'll Google it just to see who he was now, because he's going to incense me. Ari, that was his name.
Ari. Regardless, the comic had characters like that, but they were generally never in more than one issue, only to have their story, slapstickedly resolved, and then them to walk off into the sunset, and, we'll see them again someday, right? Nope. Sorry, little buddy. Okay. Next issue.
Got a speed key.
Oh, God. That was my
Sonic had some of the dumbest catchphrases in that show. I swear.
Thank you.
But, gotta scoot, toot. Gotta roll. Dole. Bob, Dole, guy.
Let's juice and
He ran out of stupid stuff to say and just started making it up.
What else?
I think he said gotta jive Clive at some point in the series.
If it rhymed, Sonic was saying it.
Exactly.
Well, regardless. Let's see. Oh, yeah. SatAM tie-ins. And the more they started tying in the SatAM stuff, actually, that was around the same time they started releasing... before they had released a single 48-page special, which was titled Sonic in Your Face, and it was really little more than just a longer version of the standard comic. It had it did have a story about... kind of a serious story, which was about Sally and Sonic and Tails and various other of the freedom fighters heading off to find out some sort of information. I don't honestly remember exactly how it went, but it was one of the more serious stories, and that was kind of those were the ones that I really enjoyed reading. But the remainder of Sonic in Your Face was pretty much just, well, hey, we're going into a backwards land. Turn comic to mirrors to read panels, lols. Sort of thing.
Oh man, remember when they actually printed a Genesis controller in the Sonic 3 adaptation?
Oh god. No, even worse. I actually pressed the buttons on that thing. Even worse, Sonic Live.
Oh gosh.
I'll get to that in a minute.
We're totally not somebody's kids here, lol.
Oh, I will tear that a new something in a second. But it was around the same time as issue 24 when they started they released the next 48-page special, which was actually based on Sonic and Knuckles, which was still a new game at the time. That kind of gives you a good time frame as to when these were coming out. For that matter, issue 13, which was obviously much earlier, was the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 comic adaptation, so titled This Island Hedgehog.
Oh, man.
Or was that? Yeah, This Island Hedgehog.
Yes.
But that was actually Knuckles' first appearance. The Sonic and Knuckles 48-page special pretty much was, just to sort of fast forward ahead in time, they ended up doing, whenever a 48-page special came out, it was usually because there was a Sonic game that had already come out or that was coming out, and so, let's capitalize on this. Making a comic, charge in an extra 50 cents for it. Booyah! And they did, and basically what they would do in every one is kind of take the basics of the plots of those games and kind of warp them to fit in this SADAM, AOSTH mind meld world that they had invented. So it's really kind of, in a lot of cases it really did not work out very well because, let's be honest, Princess Sally does not belong in a place of floating rings and Chaos Emeralds.
No, heck no. She's not built for that sort of thing.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, in some cases, it works and it works great, but in other cases, you're only doing this for a paycheck at this point. Be honest, you guys.
Oh, yeah.
But, they did Sonic and Knuckles, they later did Sonic Triple Trouble, Chaotix, various other adaptations. Pretty much any major Sonic game that came out, they made a 48-page special for. Occasionally, they would make mini-series, what's a good example? Oh, the Death Egg Saga, which is basically a god-awful retelling of the events of Sonic 2 through Sonic and Knuckles, featuring the Death Egg, which at that point had not yet been introduced to the comics for whatever retarded reason. Seeing as how the Death Egg is one of the single most important Robotnik inventions ever.
Oh, yes.
But I digress. Basically, as the series progressed, they started to get, they kept their fun-loving aspect, but they did start to get a little more serious, and as they went, they kept building upon this story. At some point, it eventually stopped becoming majorly slapstick with actual plot going on at the same time, and it started becoming a serious plot with humorous anecdotes here and there to keep up the flavor, but it eventually became a really serious story, and that was during the peak of the Sonic comics. I mean, whatever adaptations, whatever new characters they added, it was usually only to enhance the flavor of what was going on. And I think the Sonic comics really peaked in, I want to say, the 30s through the 50s. I think that was the grand peak of the American Sonic comics. Because,
and while they've had a few, since you haven't read the recent ones, they have had a few issues that are really cool, like them bringing Jack back and for briefly. And
that's another thing I wanted to touch on. Another thing I wanted to touch on was that Knuckles actually got his own side series alongside the Sonic comics that were ongoing. And that was really interesting because at that point in time, the games had not done anything to flesh out Knuckles as his own character, or let alone the floating island itself as having any form of past whatsoever. So the comics really, that was really a green light for the writers to pretty much do whatever they wanted, and they did a really good job. It was to the point where where you were taking the comics as basically canon in regards to Knuckles, where he started, and basically where everything mystical about the floating island got its origins.
Right.
That was also during the peak of the Sonic comics. That was a good couple of years. But unfortunately, all good things have to come to an end.
Oh yeah.
Eventually, someone on the writing statute of limitations for spoilers aside, It's way too old for me to have to give you a spoiler alert.
I've already read the old Sonic comics anyway. I'm just not nearly as familiar with them as you are, so...
That's true. But, what is it? Issues 47, 48, 49, and 50. That was a 4-issue arc known as the Endgame Saga.
Oh, yes.
And, issue 47, Sonic is framed for the death of Princess Sally. So yeah, that was a huge slap in the face for everyone that was a fan of the series. It's like,
really.
It's like, A, who could believe that? And B, what the hell are you doing? That's Princess Sally. You don't kill Princess Sally.
No, she's too cool to kill.
Yeah,
Way
exactly.
Too cool to kill.
Princess Sally really was solidified as a character, like, even more so than her Saddam days, which is, even though she was pretty much the only person who, besides probably Antoine, who was the exact same character in the comics as she was in Saddam.
Well, Antoine is a loser no matter what medium he's in.
I agreed wholeheartedly. But they kill off Princess Sally, and then they have Sonic running around for the next 2 issues in a bad ripoff of an old Harrison Ford movie from the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. But we're not going to name which one.
No, it certainly doesn't have anything to do with derailing prisoner trains or anything to that effect. No, that would just be retarded. Absolutely
not. It has absolutely nothing to do with, stolen identity or anything like that. I mean, it's a strictly it's just unfeasible. I mean,
And it most certainly wasn't the one-armed bit character of the week that did in Princess Sally. No.
Heck no.
But anyway, seriously. And so while this pointless side story of Jeffrey St. John, a skunk elite forces member, basically. Yeah, Joey St. Jerk.
Thank you.
My bad. So while Sonic's being chased around the globe by Joey St. Jerk in probably one of the most painful plots ever, just because it's so blatantly uninspired. In the meantime, Robotnik is capitalizing on the fact that Sonic's out of the picture and using his King Acorn drone to basically gain control over Knothole Village. Oh yes, by this point in this series, they actually had succeeded in bringing King Acorn out of the Zone of Silence, but of course he had the whole body crystallizing thing going on, kind of like how they did in Saddam. That was another thing that they took. But in this case, instead of looking like he was turning into crystal, it looked like he was turning into a King Acorn-shaped Chaos Emerald, basically. Kind of freaky.
Yes. Yes.
But to make a long story short, eventually everybody finds out, lols, I guess Sonic really might be telling the truth this time. And it's insulting to me that it's Dulcie the freaking dragon, who nobody remembers or cares about, who is the person to stand next to Sonic and say, "Lols, everybody shut up, Stifu, him tell the truth." Oh yeah, 'cause dragons can't lie, and we know this to be an irrefutable fact, so we're gonna believe you now, Sonic. Sorry about all that.
It's okay, let's go save the world. Sonic!
No. So yeah.
Sonic!
Surprise, surprise, Sonic's innocent, and everyone believes him again. Yay! Time to go back to Knothole Village. Oh, what, lols? Robotnik Peoples is here? Time to do a rescue people montage. And so, exactly. You kind of feel like that, except it's like not, you kind of feel like that, except like nowhere near the same level of epic that music inspires.
I know, really.
So Sonic kind of shows up in Knothole and, like, oh no, everyone's being roboticized. No, they're not. You guys can take care of this while I go to Robotropolis. Okay. Pew! Sonic heads to Robotropolis, confronts Robotnik, who has Doomsday Weapon number 18 by this point, I think, and he's planning to basically wipe Knothole off the face of the planet.
He's going to take the moon out of its orbit.
He's going to create chaos, destroy everything. Destroy chaos, create everything.
Absolutely.
At any rate, he presses the fire big laser button, and Sonic it isn't able to get to Robotnik before this can happen. So Sonic is under the impression that it's too late. All his friends are dead. And so he and Robotnik both have nothing left to lose. Robotropolis is there's some sort of explosion that's been rigged up by Bunny and Antoine to go off. So Robotnik's going to die. Sonic just lost everyone in Knothole that he cares about. So really, neither of them have anything left. So they proceed to duke it out. And this is where issue number 50 really shined, because Pat Spaz was at the helm as far as the art direction goes for this portion of issue 50. Issue 50 was kind of really confusing because they kept changing script writers and artists all throughout the issue. It was supposed to be like a big tag team effort, but it ended up being really confusing because the writers weren't necessarily like working closely enough together, so a lot of things really fell into the cracks.
And Robotnik put on like 850 pounds and became slightly more feminine every like fifth panel.
That sounds about right. That combined with the fact that the Sonic comics have not always had the best artists working for them, like, oh, I don't know, Scott Shaw or Dave Manick, thank you very much.
Right.
At least in the times that I gave a crap. So Sonic and Robotnik are having this ultimate final showdown, which they don't even get to finish because the Doomsday Thing machine explodes, and they're enveloped in like this big white void thing that completely envelops them. It eventually spits Sonic back out, where he falls unconscious. He's like, "Oh, I'm still here. I'm tired and stuff." Dude, fall unconscious. He wakes up in Knothole, which apparently was not destroyed, and now exists 3 seconds or something in the future of the rest of the world, which is the most retarded plot point they could have possibly introduced. But they did it anyway, and they would continue to rely on that retarded plot point for future stories, which I was never able to figure out why. But anyway...
It's like they were throwing numbers into a bag, and each number corresponded to what action they were going to take next.
It was like Mad Libs with plot.
Exactly, yes.
So Sonic wakes up from his coma, and Dr. Quack, who doesn't look anything like Donald Duck at all...
Or Howard the Duck.
Not at all.
Not at all.
He comes along and basically gives
I
Sonic...
love his name, too. That is so epic.
I know, that's the best part about that character.
It is, really.
So he comes along and he's like, "Oh, you're awake. Here, let me give you the retarded Treknobabble plot hole filler explanation about what just happened." Okay, but that's not important. Is Sally okay, even though I know that she's supposed to be dead? Well, actually, she's really just comatose, and she's kind of waiting in, like, some sort of stasis thing, which may or may not look like a glass coffin. And right there, glass coffin. That should let you know where the remainder of this issue is going.
Son of it's a Sleeping Beauty parody.
Well, to be specific, Snow White. But yes, it's the same. It's part and parcel.
Wait. I thought Sleeping Beauty did the same thing, didn't she?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, you gotta
okay,
awaken
then I was right.
Awaken the fair maiden with true love's kiss. But in Snow White, she was actually in a glass coffin. So.
Oh, that just sucks.
Yeah. So Sonic, hearing the news, goes to wake up Princess Sally. Of course, so cliche with true love's kiss. And he lifts off the top of the stasis chamber thing, kind of like he must have had an army of like Sega's lawyers looking over his shoulder, because he kind of gave her like a quick peck type thing on the cheek, and then everything's okay and she's awake and she's like, "Yay!" And then the issue kind of ends. It was at that point that I pretty much lost faith in the comics as a whole at that point, because, well, that issue was the last issue that actually featured Dr. Ivo Robotnik. For one, they killed off Robotnik. You don't kill off Sally, and you most certainly don't kill off the central villain of the story.
Yes.
But also, just the way the whole thing was handled was, it just felt like, well, we're reaching our 50th issue, we need to do something big, and instead of like letting the plot naturally progress, it felt like they wanted to do so much with it but didn't know what the hell they were doing in the end.
So in the end, they just kind of drop the ball over and over and over again.
Exactly. And the fact, like, if you're not gonna, okay, I'm gonna go into a little rant here for a second, more so than I already have. But if you're going to feature a kiss between the hero and his significant other, you don't do it on the cheek. That doesn't happen. But apparently, we can.
It's the funny kiss.
The funny kiss, yeah. See, that's it right there, actually. Because Saddam, which we'll get into in Act 3, kind of did a same sort of thing and got into a similar sort of trouble, or at least so I can assume was the case with Archie. But apparently Sonic is not allowed to have girlfriends.
Apparently Sonic is not allowed to have a lot of things. And this is why we can't have nice things.
That is why we can't have nice things. So, but to their credit, I will say...
It's got everything but the Betty-Veronica love triangle.
Basically, well, that came in later, which I'll get into that in a second.
Oh, shut up. I don't want to talk about that.
To Archie's credit, they did go back later and basically release what they called a director's cut version of issue 50, which cleaned up
slightly less.
Sucked slightly less, yeah, but it was less enough for me to actually say I'm glad that I owned this issue of the comic, honestly. Because they went back and redid a lot of the spots where the art was lacking so hardcore that it made it just completely awkward. That, and they went back and they added in extra word bubbles and cleaned up the plot holes to a large extent. They basically went back and whacked everything with the make it good again stick. And for the most part, it worked.
Initiate the make everything okay device.
Exactly. They enacted a Deus Ex Machina.
Yes.
And
you mean Sprayus Ex Machina, am I right?
You are right, lols. Basically, they made the whole thing a more appealing experience overall. It still can't erase the overall badness that was Endgame, but you know what? It was much better than the previous attempt. It flowed a lot more smoothly. It was something that you actually wouldn't mind reading. And that, coupled with the fact that they ended it right, meaning Sonic wakes up Sally with a quick little kiss on the cheek, and then basically full-on embrace, dips her, lip lock. Well, it was nice. It was for the fans because that's what we wanted, and that's what we got. Unfortunately, I think it also really gave extra power to the furries. But
hey, dude, no offense. I think David Gonderman beat them to that a long time prior.
Yeah, well, they didn't have to mix Sonic up in it, so there. Long story short, I pretty much was done with the comics after the original Endgame arc, but I picked up various issues afterwards just to see where things were going, to see how they were screwing things up, and indeed, I was right. A lot of things went down the tubes from there. I think around the time that Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 came out, the series kind of started to pick back up in quality, and I actually started going and reading it again, but it was also around that time that Jay Axer and Don Best of Sonic fan art fame back in the day were hired on as artists. And I can't help but think that they brought some of their fandom with them, because around that same time we started seeing an obscene influx of new characters that were having entire arcs written about them. And it just... I'm sorry, isn't this still Sonic the Hedgehog?
I guess that's what it says on the cover of the book.
Yeah, you would assume that, right?
Right.
But no, they start introducing characters like Mina Mongoose, and they just got out of control with that. That, and for a while, even though they started getting back more to the nitty-gritty, serious side of things, eventually the series just degraded into basically your run-of-the-mill teen drama featuring your favorite Mobians.
Right.
Basically, Dawsonic's Creek.
Right, yes, exactly.
I'm sorry, love triangles do not... I mean, I could see, a Sonic, Amy, Sally thing going on, but when you have, I'm sorry, Mina Mongoose has to die.
Yeah, she's boring.
She was, from what I can see, she was pretty much solely introduced to be a alternate love interest for Sonic, and I'm sorry, but the comics going
We
on
already
for
have that spot filled.
yeah,
and
that spot
the person
that spot has been
does a lot better job.
Yeah, that spot has been filled. They do a better job at it, and there's already someone waiting in line to be the next one. Thanks very much.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then along comes Newbie the Robo Arm.
Newbie the Robo Arm.
That's what she is. Newbie the Robo Arm, and I'm sorry, I can't talk about this aspect of the comics anymore. Basically, it infuriates me. Just to see what happened. I mean, it started out really not knowing. The comics really started out not knowing what its own identity was. Eventually built itself up into something great that people looked forward to and people identified with because it was basically the next Saddam. And then I think at that point pretty much sales figures got involved into things and unnecessary progress was made. That was the end game, was the point where the series jumped the shark in its motorcycle and slicked back its hair and then pointed its fingers at you and went, "Ay." And it really never 100% brought itself back after that. And that was seriously. And that was the really depressing part about it. And it's I just don't know what else to say about it other than it had a great beginning. Darned if I wasn't a fan, but damned if I think I will ever give it a chance again after I saw what they did to it. Flash, do you have anything to add?
It sucks. Thanks for listening. Actually,
Transition
seriously,
music goes here.
Seriously, yeah. The comics they started out great and they really became disappointing. And as I've read the more recent issues,
I'm
I think
sorry.
my biggest complaint really was how they axed the Knuckles series.
Yeah,
they were doing
I forgot to mention
job
that.
with that.
Really, that was the part of the ongoing Sonic comics that was, at that point, like, there was a little lull in between, I think, not a lull, a lull. And I think
Yes.
between issues like 40 through 50, there was a little lull, and the Knuckles comics were going on alongside of that, and they were the more entertaining reads at that point.
Right. Did we discuss the Knuckles comics in this? I mean, to any extent?
Yeah. Basically, that it was like that Knuckles himself and the floating island really had no mythos to them at all, so the comics kind of invented that for it and did a really good job.
They really did. And the characters were very interesting, too, like the Brotherhood of the Guardians, the Dark Legion.
The Dark Legion, oh. Unfortunately, there's a lot about specifically the Dark Legion and the Brotherhood that can't be explained without spoiling a lot. And that's one thing that I really would feel bad about spoiling, because the Knuckles series is just so good.
Yeah, the Knuckles series is so good. It's great as a standalone. You don't even need to read the Sonic comic to appreciate it.
Exactly. I mean, if you know the basics about Knuckles, you'll probably get into his series.
Yeah, Knuckles was almost like the Racer X of that series in a way. He was just so interesting and different. I mean, it was kind of like he had his, when you see Knuckles in Sonic's world, he's always that aloof loner jerk, and you're always like, man, what's his problem? But reading his backstory, you understand. It makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the whole appeal of that. It's not like you can at that point you could really pick and choose what you wanted to pay attention to. I mean, obviously you got into the series through Sonic, so you may want to choose that path, or you could have them both, or you could just, you could at that point you could pick a side, pick what was most appealing to you. But after they canceled the Knuckles series for reasons that I cannot even begin to fathom, then they kind of took that choice away from you. But while it lasted, it was good. And it's not like Knuckles, that was basically the end of Knuckles' own side stories. I mean, every now and then they would include, here's what's going on in the life of the Guardian of the Floating Island. But really never to the same extent.
It was just basically a series that had so much potential and it got shot down so early. It really is a shame.
Yeah, it is a pity.
30-something issues is not nearly long enough.
Definitely not.
So, definitely not. And the art was amazing too.
Oh yeah,
It's
like where the Sonic comics, like I think really wavered back and forth between like they switched artists so often for issues that like you'd open an issue and pretty much guess right away whether or not you would like the issue depending on who drew it.
Right.
Whereas the Knuckles series, I think Ken Penders pretty much single-handedly did both the plots and the art, for that matter, of the Knuckles series for a long time, and that was where he really shined in the whole Sonic comic creation.
Right.
Because he used to suck ass as an artist, but he eventually got really good.
You know, it cracks me up too. Art Mawhinney is another name. I don't think we've dropped him yet.
No, we haven't. Art Mawhinney is legendary because I think he's worked on Sonic the Comic, right?
Yes, he worked on both of them, if I recall correctly.
That is awesome of him. He's got a lot of Sonic under his belt. Sonic the Comic, Archie Sonic, and I believe he was also involved in the production of Sad-Am.
I believe he was as well.
So that guy, like, he has
legendary.
Yes, he has a specific style about him, and like, even though there are, I believe, much more talented artists that have done Sonic,
right.
Art Mawhinney is really just you can't fault him because he does a good job at portraying what he needs to portray, and he does each character justice. Might not be as pretty, might not be as polished as some other artists, but Art Mawhinney is a guy you can always depend on to get the job done and get it done right.
Right. He was steady. He didn't deviate a whole lot. You knew what to expect from him.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, it's weird because it feels like there should be like a third version of the comics we're discussing. And while I could talk about Sonic X,
Please don't.
I won't.
Thank you.
Because I don't like Tracy Yardley's art style,
Yeah.
and so there.
That, and I don't think we care to get into some of the bigger crappers of Archie, like Sonic Live, a.k.a. Gary Sue and Mary Stu the comic.
Yes, we're definitely not going into that.
The only thing I'll say about that is, yes, those are Ken Pender's niece and nephew, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken Penders. I really think Dan Drazen should have been involved with the production of the comic. He really deserved that pedestal.
Yeah, Drazen's a great author as far as like Sad-Am-based fanfic goes, but he needs to know when to put a lid on certain things, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, we haven't heard from him in so long, too.
That's true. I think, honestly, he's kind of given up on the comics as a whole as well, because I know he used to review every issue that came out, like, religiously, and I think he just hit the same point that really you and I did, is that we just got sick of the direction the comics were going and just decided to quit while we were ahead and remember the times that we had.
Thank you guys for listening to us ramble about our childhoods. We really appreciate it.
Seriously, it's fun to get off our chests, and honestly, we hope this gives you a better idea as to basically how we got our start in the video game worlds, in essence.
It was really, like I said, it was such an important part of Sonic heritage that we felt like we had to mention it.
The comics, yeah. Because, like, until the games came up with their own mythos for everything, really, the comics were all we had. That and stuff that we would make up in a bout of Theorymon.
Oh yeah, and you have to give Archie credit for one thing. Sonic the Hedgehog, the comic, is still going.
Yeah, so obviously they're doing something right if people are still buying it, but I'm not sold on it anymore.
Yeah, it is what it is, but it was what it was, and when it was in that era, it was really something to remember. And sometime, maybe in the distant future, I'd like to sit down and perhaps talk about the super specials or something, and like maybe like
in depth.
an hour rant, talk about the various ones like Sonic Quest and how disappointing that one was.
Oh, the Death Egg Saga, yeah, we've talked
I'm
about
gonna
that.
grab a handful of power rings on my way out of the ship. We keep power rings in a bucket here for some stupid reason. That was so retarded.
Wow. Oh, yeah. Maybe we'll come back and just go through each, 48-page special and just random crap talk about what sucks about each one of them.
That would definitely... I actually never read, because I think I owed this to myself, I never, ever picked up the Sonic and Sabrina crossover, and I'm grateful for that.
That or the Image crossover.
Nah, the Image crossover looked like crap. I have 3 copies of that, and I haven't read
I'm
it.
so sorry.
It sucks.
I think you're the only person I know that has admitted to that.
It just, yeah, like I said, I own a couple copies of it, and I've never touched it. It looks like it's crap, so I'm just letting it sit there, biding my time.
It sucks. Thanks for reading.
Exactly. Wow. Well, thank you so much for listening to us. We really enjoyed getting to be here tonight. I know I enjoyed getting to talk about Sonic the Comic, even if half of it was incoherent rambling and general summarization of what a jackass Sonic is.
Yeah, it's good to be back doing this. We've been kind of inactive for a while just because, honestly, this is the same thing that happens on a yearly basis, I think. Things just go random nuts during the time the holidays roll around and things kind of get dropped by the wayside, but we always pick it back up again.
That sounds about accurate, especially we've also been moving. I mean, give us some credit here, it's not...
Yeah, that's true. The location you guys saw in the Volume 1 video is actually my new apartment. I moved a couple months ago, and I'm still unpacking, basically.
Yeah, me too, especially after out of a 2-story, 5-bedroom house.
Yeah, that must have been an absolute chore.
Oh, dude, I only wish you had been here to help break your back with me.
I would have been happy to oblige.
Yes. Well, thank you guys. Act 3 up next, and then I think we can spoil this. We have a special boss battle planned for you to finish off the ELB zone. So
yeah, essentially.
Yeah, keep listening. Thanks for sticking with us, and we promise you some great content this year.
Exactly. We've been doing a lot of planning. We got some stuff in the works. We can't determine when exactly you'll be seeing it, but be looking forward to it all the same.
And with that said, it sucks. Thanks for listening.
Indeed. That is such a great fallback.
It is. It is such a great fallback. It's a great space filler. Can we please
Yeah.
restart this whole thing? Please, please.
At any rate, Emma, good night to all. See next you time.
Next time, try on hard mode.
And thank you for your super play.
This is Flash Maniac C of iLaser Beams, signing out.
And this is Breakmaniac signing out.